Started. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to session 3 of level 1 of the Berklee Music Education and Special Needs Study Group. I'm Dr. Rhoda Bernard, Managing Director of the Berklee Institute for Arts Education and Special Needs. It's a pleasure to be with you all again for session 3 in level 1 of the study group. Today, we have 2 presenters this morning who are going to dive really deeply into some hands-on, very specific strategies that you'll be able to use and adapt for your teaching situation. I'm going to start off with a few logistics, and we're going to do some more logistics at the end so that we've got all of our logistical pieces. None of this is super brand new. It's more reminders for folks, particularly folks who wish to receive professional development points and certificates of participation around what full participation looks like. So this is the schedule of the synchronous sessions of the study group. We have already had the March 6th and March 20th sessions. And a note on March 20th, I sent out a separate email with the recording of the Universal Design for Learning presentation by Rhiannon Gutierrez, which I highly recommend. It's a YouTube video. It's excellent, and it'll give you some great content. So today we are learning about multimodal instruction and teaching demonstrations from Nadia, Castanya, Morin, and drum notation and work in percussion from Gretchen, Hary. And this afternoon from 1 to 4, we will have Tomas Marcus with us, and he'll be doing 2 topics, music technology, and also working with students with very high support needs. We then, 2 weeks from now, meet on the 17th of April, and we'll be looking at assessment with me and choral ensembles for people with disabilities with Andrew Clark from Harvard University. And we'll be looking in the afternoon at adaptive notation and instrumental ensembles with Shana Pistilli. On May 1st, 2 weeks following that, Victoria Laricha is here with us to work on differentiation of instruction and behavior management. And in the afternoon, music learning theory with people with disabilities and special education strategies that adapt well to arts education with me. And then on the 15th of May is when projects are due, and Victoria and I will be providing feedback for project sharing. So as you know, I send out the session videos no later than the following Monday. So likely on Monday, you'll receive the video, and they are emailed links so you can watch them directly from the Zoom system. In addition, in terms of full participation in the study group, what is required? Attendance at 18 hours of sessions that can be synchronously or asynchronously. That can be level 1, level 2, or a mixture of both. And also is required the between session engagement. So after each session on Monday, you receive a link to a Google document where you share your thoughts and reflections in response to the session. So that's required for all of the sessions. And finally, your creation of and presentation of a study group project. There will be certificates of participation that in Massachusetts also carry professional development points. Those will go out to the attendees who have participated after the full set of sessions has taken place. We'll probably do them in 2 rounds. We'll probably do one fairly soon after so that folks who were mostly synchronously and were able to get that time get their certificates, but then we'll wait a bit for the asynchronous folks who need more time to complete. So what is a study group project? And we'll talk a little bit more about this at the end of today's session as well. I'll share some of the ideas that have come up. But the real big picture goal is that you apply some aspect of what you learn in the study group to your own situation. It might have to do with creating curriculum or activities or developing certain modifications, adaptations, or assessments, or trying something new and documenting what you notice, or a case study of work with individual students. There's a Google Doc where people have been sharing some ideas, and I'll give you some examples from that as well, but I also suggest that you take a look at that. Projects are not expected to be finalized, tie on a bow, neat packages. They are works in progress. We are spending 12 weeks together. What you will share at the end of our 12 weeks is a snapshot of where you are in this application. And depending on what your project is, depends on what your deliverable looks like. You're going to be presenting on May 15th. The presentation tends to be quite brief. It says here under 10 minutes, I'm going to say it's going to be likely around 5 minutes because we're going to have a lot of them. Most people present some kind of short oral presentation, and some folks use a slideshow with a couple of slides or a very short video when it's appropriate. And if you can't attend the synchronous session, either of them that day, but want your project to be shared, I will announce this again and again, but you can send the project to me and I will make sure it's shared and that you get feedback on your behalf. We want you to start thinking about your project sooner rather than later, which is why we have the Google document, and it's already been shared, and I will continue to share it again and again after each session in the famous Monday emails. So that's the situation with projects and where they are, and we'll talk more about them. I'll share some ideas with you at the end of the session, but we'll talk more about them then. There was something else that I would like to share with you just in response to people's questions, that I just need to stop the share and then reshare so that I get to Google Chrome. So people have been asking about the Able Assembly Arts Better the Lives of Everyone conference. And I went through this a couple of weeks ago, but I will do it again for folks who are interested. So our Able Assembly Arts Better the Lives of Everyone conference is going to take place online next weekend, April 10th and 11th. The theme of the conference this year, and this is our 10th offering, is intersectionality, disability, and arts education. The format of the conference is some synchronous and some asynchronous content, and the synchronous keynotes then get recorded so that they can be shared asynchronously. So we start each day at noon Boston time with a keynote presentation. On Saturday, we'll be hearing from Emmeline Bingham, who is a musician and conductor on the autism spectrum. And on Sunday, we'll be hearing from Antoine Hunter, who is a deaf dancer, and with some other disabilities that he'll describe. Then there's a pre-recorded musical performance that we watch. On Saturday, we'll watch the Merry Rockers, which is a reggae band fronted by a young woman visually impaired with cerebral palsy. And Sunday, we will watch Adam Walden, a cellist on the autism spectrum. Then from 1 to 4, we have these pre-recorded 20-minute breakout sessions that represent all of the art forms and all of the disability populations, and that address the theme of intersectionality, disability, and arts education. At 4 o'clock, we come back for a synthesis session that is live and not recorded, but a chance for the speakers from the whole day's schedule to interact with everybody and for us to interact as a group. And then we go straight into an open networking session, which is just a fun chance to hang out. And the same schedule happens the next day. So I strongly suggest that you consider registering for the conference. Registration is open through Monday, April 5th, and it's going to be a fantastic event. New this time around is that all registrants to the Able Assembly will also receive access to our brand new digital learning series, which starts May 1st. 2021 is the first one will drop, and I know that is the same time that we're meeting, but it's something that you can see asynchronously. And that first session will be all about joining an iPad band with Adam Goldberg and Pete Sparks, two leaders in the field of music education and technology for inclusive music making. And they met for the first time at our Able Assembly online conference in October, where Pete was one of the keynote speakers and Adam was one of the presenters. So I love when those connections happen. And their session is going to be highly participatory and something that you can also interact with before and after the synchronous event. So that's a little bit about the conference. I'm going to stop that share and turn things over to our first presenter of the day, who is Nadia Castagna Morin. I know that she will introduce herself in the presentation, but I will say here that she is an alumnus of our Master of Music and Music Education with a concentration in music and autism. and she is a highly valued teaching staff member at the Berklee Institute for Arts Education and Special Needs. She teaches in essentially every program that we offer, and when we offer new programs, she somehow ends up teaching in those too. So we are overjoyed to have Nadia with us, and she'll tell you more about herself and her presentation. So I'll hand it over to you, Nadia.
All right, so let me just share my screen with everyone so that you can see it. Okay, so today I am presenting on multimodal instruction and teaching demos. So about me, my name is Nadia Castagna, Morin. Still getting used to my new last name, even though it's been a new last name for like 6 years now. Anyway, I've been teaching for about 9 years. I kind of started music education at a very different way. I started out as a psychology major, and then I went on to Lesley University and got a bachelor's in expressive arts therapies, realized I wanted to do music education more than I wanted to do music therapy, and found Dr. Bernard and this awesome program. And I was I think I was the first cohort that came in, or one of myself and Gretchen. So I also got one of my first official teaching jobs at Berklee Institute for Arts Education and Special Needs on Saturdays. Like Dr. Bernard said, I think I've taught in everything. Right now, the only thing I don't teach in is the chorus program, which is led by Kayla and Marissa now. But anyway, I also work at the New England Center for Children during the weekday, and in the fall I will be starting at Western New England University for a postmaster's program in applied behavioral analysis in order to get my BCBA, which is a board certified behavioral analysis, and so I can start merging music ed and ABA. So when creating the curriculum for Music with Miss Nadia, there are several things that I go through personally to create it. I don't have a specific area, like a specific theory that I work in consistently. I pick from a lot of different things. So I work a little bit with Orff. I work a little bit with Gordon. I work a little bit with Kodai, so with hand signs and everything. So I kind of pick and choose from different areas, and pick the ones that apply most to my students. I like to do a lot of movement and then sitting activities, so to kind of break up the class, because sitting for half an hour is hard, especially for young children. A lot of what I do is trial and error. You got to try something first. If it doesn't work out, you got to have a backup and try that next. And a little bit of what I do, which is kind of based on what I do in at NECC. NECC is an ABA-based school. Applied behavioral analysis is a little bit of what's added in. Okay. So age appropriateness is another thing that I have to consider. A lot of the students that I work with have severe disabilities, and I have to kind of think about age appropriateness. I've gotten confronted a few times at a few separate schools that they're thinking that, more simple songs or songs that have maybe 2 chord changes are considered quote unquote a baby song. But it's not necessarily a baby song. It is something that needs to be taught. I mean, when we learn math as an individual, we don't start at multiplication and division, we start with counting. Just the same with music. Like, we don't start with electronic music, we have to start with something simple so we can understand chord changes. And I also have to consider the types of students, the ages that I am working with. So the structure of a class that typically happens, right here I have a schedule that I use with, it's Miss Nadia and Mr. Miles. We work together. You guys saw Miles, I believe, last month, but we work together on Saturdays. So a typical schedule would be a hello song, a warm-up song of maybe our body and breath, maybe doing some melodic patterns or rhythmic patterns, alternating between movement and seated activities. We like to add in a jam session at the end because jam session is super fun and it allows students to kind of like work with the instruments that they have and free jam pretty much. And then we conclude with a goodbye song. So it's really important to have an opening and a closing song. I'll sing both of these for you, but the opening song kind of gives a context for where we are and what we're going to be doing. The goodbye song also just kind of wraps it up. There are a lot of students that have transitional behaviors and that get really anxious at the end or the beginning of class. So having a set time where we start and where we end is perfect. So here's our hello song. Time for music, tidy-o. Time for music, tidy-o. Jingle at the window, tidy-o. Jingle at the window, tidy-o. Jingle in, Joe. Jingle at the window, tidy-o. Jingle at the window, tidy-o. Then we would go on to sing a student's name. So, hello, Tyler, tidy-o. Hello, Tyler, tidy-o. Hi, Tyler. And then having that little extra, hi, Tyler, at the end allows enough space for students to reply back, hi, Miss Nadia, or they could wave, or however they would like to greet you. And our goodbye song, you could make it fast, you could make it slow. I actually made this particular goodbye song a little bit faster because I had a very young student that every time I played it slow would cry because it made him sad. So I play it a little bit faster now so it's not as sad. And it's really nice to have different time signatures. Students can get used to different time signatures. Come, my friends, and gather round so we can sing goodbye. We'll sing and dance another day. So long, farewell, goodbye. And that last, so long, farewell, goodbye, could be something that the student says or fills in. Sometimes I say so, and then they answer with long, and I say fair, they answer with well. I say good, they answer with bye. It just depends on the abilities of each student. So support is a big thing that I look forward to in my classes. I know that I am in a special situation where the New England Center for Children is a school where most of the students, I would say at least 95% of the students have at least like a 1-to-1 ratio, so one teacher, one student. I know that this is not the case in many areas. I also did work in public schools where sometimes the paraprofessionals would come to class, sometimes they wouldn't. So I completely understand with support. But when you are thinking about support in class, what I like to look at is how many students I have, the type of environment I'm going to have, whether I'm in their classroom or I'm in my own classroom. The type of assistance that's needed, whether students have high support need or low support need, any kind of modifications or adaptations I could add in, and then what kind of prompts am I going to have to use. If you're doing this yourself, your prompting might look a little bit different. When I do this with 7 other teachers in the room, my prompting sometimes is geared towards teachers, sometimes is geared towards students. Kind of depends. So with adaptations and modifications, you can have many different things, different visuals, different colors, different sounds, actions, all kinds of different items, and all of this equals accessibility. And accessibility is really the most important part of, for me anyway, in music education, especially for my students. Accessibility is the most important part. So I have some general music examples. I use this kind of sign. I have a Promethean board in my room, but you could also do this and laminate them and have signs for what instrument you want to take out. I have a picture of the instrument and then the word next to it. I also use different words that go with fruits and vegetables. A lot of our students are emerging speech learners, so I like to associate rhythm with speech in order for it to kind of click in and make sense a little bit. So what I would like to do is I'm going to do one of these activities. This is exactly how I would have it on my screen. I have pictures of what I would like. I found with my students that putting a color behind the notation kind of indicates a little bit better than just looking at black and white changes in notation. So I do rest as hands out just like this. So putting your hands, I even say, get as close as you would like to the screen, because right now I'm remote. But in person, I would also say, put your hands out just like this. And our purple note is actually pi. So we clap. So it'll be rest, pi, rest, pi, rest, pi, rest, pi. Stuck in a candy store overnight. Jelly beans and bubble gum, my delight. Sour candy, sweet candy, I'll take a bite. Wonder how much I can eat stuck overnight. So this is one way that I would do it. I could also say rest and clap, rest and clap. It just depends on the students that I'm working with. It depends on what class. Some of my classes are very low support need. Some of my classes are very high support need. And I also have some classes where they're mixed. Like there may be 1 or 2 students that have low support needs and 1 or 2 students that have high support needs. So I have to accommodate for everything. This is an example of something that you could adapt for a student that maybe needs a little bit more of a challenge. So rest, apple, rest, pie, rest, apple, rest, pie. You could even change the pie to a stomp to make it even more challenging. So rest, clap, clap, rest, stomp, rest, clap, clap, rest, stomp. So you could make this as simple or as complex as you would like to meet the needs of each student. What I do like to say is if we are moving on to something complex and I still have students that are working on rest, clap, clap, I just ask their teachers or I work with them myself and we just do rest, clap together while everybody else is doing rest, apple, rest, pie. All right, so I also, if we need to use a specific instrument, I also provide the picture of the instrument. In this case, it was rhythm sticks. So I have my rhythm sticks. When I first made this picture, I had blue rhythm sticks. Now I have red because it shows up a lot better and a lot easier to identify than blue. But right now I have blue. You can also have different visuals and stimulation for teaching form. So an example of teaching form is I put the letters with colors because colors for my students end up working out a lot better. And I also made different movements. So during the A section, we are only patting our legs. During the B section, we are only tapping our shoulders. And during the C section, we are only clapping. So you can use this kind of format with classical music, genre, pop music, anything, or even something simple like the Mango song. So the Mango song is only A, B, C, but I'd like to do it for you. You could do it, I would like to keep it actually with what I have on the screen, but you can do this with shakers. But my first part is going to sound like this. So we're going to tap our legs. Pat, pat, pat your legs. Pat, pat, pat your legs. Mango, 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 mango. Mango, 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 mango. And now we're going to move on to the B section. So tap your shoulders. Kiwi, 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 kiwi. Stop. Build up anticipation. It's more fun that way. Tap your shoulders again. Kiwi, 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 and stop. And then the last section will be clapping our hands. Banana, banana, banana. Cherry, banana, 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 cherry. Raise your hands up high, then down low. Raise your hands up high, then down low. So we are working with form, but we're also working with pitch as well. Up high, down low. So let me show you what this song looks like in its entirety without stopping. Here we go. Pat, pat. Pat your legs. Mango, 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 mango. Mango, 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 mango. Kiwi, 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 and stop. Kiwi, 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 and stop. Banana, banana, banana. Cherry, banana, 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 cherry. And then go back to the mango part. Mango, mango, mango. So that's another way that you could teach form and have all these types of adaptations to it to accommodate every student in the class. A lot of the times I make visuals not only for students, but also for teachers or other support staff that are in the classroom. Sometimes it's easier for them too to facilitate if they don't have to read my mind. So here's something a little bit more if your students need a little bit less on the page. So I would change this from A section to B section to C section. So I also teach a remote group piano class. I just started it about 2 weeks ago. Piano's difficult. It's difficult, especially for students that have limited finger dexterity and limited experience or practice with coordination. So a lot of the coordination that happens with our hands needs to be very slow, very deliberate, and we need to start with the fewest fingers that we can. What I start with my students is 1 finger, then we move on to 2 fingers, and then we move on to 3 fingers, and then we move on to 5 fingers. Here's kind of what I had for a setup, because right now it's remote, so I have to help teachers and parents help their students during class. So I just have them going forth, pointing to each finger, lighting up the key that it's going to be on. I do use a color system. I found that colors worked better. I do have some students that read letters, so I have letters on it as well. That also helps. I'm trying to accommodate as many students as I can during class. Tiered questioning is a really good way to kind of differentiate between students. Now, during class, we watched a video, and this particular video, I provided the link on the page, and it was a video to a performance of Ray Charles singing What I'd Say. And it's a black and white video. It's him and his band. So my first tier question for students that are just beginning with answering questions and beginning with music, I have a choice between one or the other. So my choice could be, did Ray Charles play the trumpet or the piano? Let's decide. If you're remote, you can work with the annotate feature and have them circle on the screen. If you're in person, you can have them point to the picture. You can have them say it out loud. There's a bunch of different ways to respond. For a tier 2 question, let me go back 1 second. A tier 1 question could also be a yes or no question. So one or the other. A tier 2 question is a little bit open-ended, but with a clear answer. So what instruments did you see in the video? If it wasn't in the video, then we didn't see it. So it's kind of like there's a clear answer there, but there's also plenty of options to choose from. Now, this question could be done with or without a choice board. So you could ask just the first question, or you can provide a choice board with it. And a tier 3 question is open-ended. There's no correct answer. What did you notice about the music in the video? And then the students can respond. That's a tier 3 question. Those are for students that can handle an open response answer, that don't need to have a concrete answer. So right now, I would like you to reflect for about 15 seconds on how you could fit tiered questioning into your lessons. So I'm just gonna count in my head nice and slow, 15 seconds. I'll let you know when you have 5 seconds left. All right, here we go, beginning. Five seconds. Okay, so we are going to move forward to in-class support. Now, I talked about support staff earlier, but I think it is important to recognize the ratio in classrooms and use the support staff as much as possible. A lot of the times I hear that people don't want to cause a rift. However, a support staff is there for support, and it's your opportunity to use support as best as you can. I like to inform parents and staff exactly what I'm looking for and exactly what we're doing in the lesson. So again, not only am I teaching students and communicating to them what we need to be doing, but I'm also giving side notes to parents or staff. For instance, during class, I do an activity, right now we're in a unit where we're studying music from other countries. And in Brazil, there is an instrument called the surdo, and they use one rhythm stick in one hand. So I wanted to have students start alternating their hands. I still have students of all ages that are working on this. Alternating your hands is very difficult. It's a very difficult skill, especially if you need to cross the midline. So what I tell parents and staff is that they can go as slow as they need to, especially if they're prompting. So I'll talk about prompting later. I'll save that. But when we do this lesson, I tell them, even if you have to go slower than me, go slower than me. If the student is really great, have them go a little bit faster. That's okay too. So communication is always the best. I've actually had to write letters to administration and staff, as well as have meetings with them about my expectations in my music class. I've also made support slideshows that I distributed to each team in my school. We call them teams instead of classrooms. So we have like a 20-minute support, like how to support a student in music and art instruction. So if you would like, you can email me and I can send you that link, and you can see what I kind of talked about in the support video. Okay, and also overall have a lot of patience because it's difficult on both ends. My best advice is keep a positive relationship, work together, give clear directions, and have open communication. Those are the only ways that support staff are going to be completely incorporated. And they're super valuable too. So now let's move on to prompting. Now, prompting is just kind of like giving students a little bit of a reminder, and there are several different ways that we can do that. Before any kind of prompting is done, a baseline should be taken. A baseline means what can students do independently, right? So that is the least intrusive. Least intrusive just meaning you don't have to do anything. You're just getting a baseline. The next thing that would happen is a verbal request or a question like, what should you be doing right now? Or play the drum. That's another one. Short and concise, play the drum. Or you could even say play drum to make it even shorter. Nice and concise and to the point. The next one would be a gesture, pointing to something with your finger. It's a nonverbal cue. Sometimes prompting is combined, like a gesture with a verbal prompt, but it doesn't always have to be that way. So pointing to an item like the drum, when you say play the drum and the student doesn't play the drum, you could point to it, and that could indicate, okay, I need to play the drum now. The next thing could be a visual prompt, and we've seen quite a few of those. I've showed you. Play drum. That's my visual prompt. So you could, again, laminate this. You could put this on your board. You can have this as like a slideshow, anything you'd like. But it has play drum and it has a visual response, what it should look like. I also like to give a lot of representation of students and skin tone. If it works best, students like to see themselves represented in pictures. So I represent as much as I can, wherever I can. Modeling is one that we use quite frequently. We demonstrate what needs to be done. I also see a lot of teachers that come in with their students, sitting next to their students, modeling what it would be like to hit the drum, and the student does it next to them. So demonstrate. And lastly, physical prompting. This is the most intrusive. This means that you are physically guiding a student. So physical assistance could be from the upper arm, so above the elbow, just kind of like giving a gentle touch to kind of like move the arm forward or back. Sometimes students just need like a reminder, like touch the arm. Forearm, you can prompt from forearm as well. You can also prompt from the hand. So I've seen a lot of parents putting their hands, and even teachers sometimes, hands on top to help drum. Never on a joint. That's very dangerous. Never prompt using somebody's elbow or their wrist. You always want to do above the wrist, below the elbow, above the elbow, below the shoulder. It's not safe to do it on a joint. So now what I'd like to do is take another reflection. I've shown all the different kinds of prompting, an example of what it can start with and how it evolves into a physical prompt if needed. And the next prompt that I would like to look at is a verbal prompt saying, put your drum away. How would you convert this verbal prompt into 2 other stages of prompting? Maybe gesture or visual, maybe physical and modeling. What other 2 stages of prompting could you turn put your drum away into? I'll count 20 seconds. Five seconds. Okay. So now vocalizations. I want to do a little bit with this. Vocalizations involve tonal patterns and rhythmic patterns. We also need to consider nonverbal students. So participation and communication. How are they going to participate? We like to say any response is a response. If students are responding to you, then it's a response. We don't need it to be exactly perfect for it to be something, to have a meaningful remark. And communication. Some students are going to use devices, whether they're low tech or high tech, and some of students need choice boards. So now, you guys are going to check this out a little bit more with Krista in the next few months, but this is a little bit of Gordon. This is kind of what my colleague Miles and I use when we are working with students vocalizing and singing. So there are 3 different phases that a student goes through. Acculturation, which is an absorption phase and a response. So absorption's just meaning that they are taking in everything. Maybe it would look like students sitting in class, really not responding, kind of like absorbing everything they hear in class. And then a response, it could be anything, just response happening, in response to music, in response in general. So I would encourage you to listen to post-class time. Some students are singing the songs that you sung in class. Sometimes I have students that are singing that they didn't sing during class, but they'll sing after class, or they'll sing at home. So those are also 2 things that it's okay if there's silence in the class. Imitation, I put egocentricity and breaking the code. So that just means that students are noticing that what they're doing doesn't necessarily match what's being taught. And so they're kind of like working through what it's going to look like and sound like to be able to get to that point where you can echo the teacher. And assimilation, so introspection and coordination. Students are starting to get to the point where they are repeating back for the teacher, and they are starting to generate their own responses. Okay. So here are some examples of tonal patterns that this is part of the Gordon theory. And again, you'll learn more about this with Krista. This is just kind of like a small overview. And this is what it would look like for rhythmic patterns. Now, when we do these tonal patterns and rhythmic patterns, there is a song that my colleague Miles made up, and it's called the Narwhal Song. This is one that I would use a tonal pattern with. It's a lot safer to not mix tonal and rhythmic patterns. You want to make sure that tonal patterns are staying separate from rhythmic patterns so that it doesn't wind up too confusing. So let me go back to this. Here's the song. If I was a narwhal, what would I be? A whale with a tooth sticking out in front of me. If I was a narwhal, what would I do? I'd want to share my song with you. This is a part where students could echo. It goes ba, ba, ba. Your turn. It goes ba, ba, ba. It goes ba, ba, ba. It goes ba, ba, ba. An Arctic dwelling mammal in the deep blue sea. I'm a carnivore, which means I like to eat meat, like squid and halibut, shrimp and cod, like the dolphin, my cousin. I travel in pods. If I was a narwhal, what would I be? A whale with a tooth sticking out in front of me. If I was a narwhal, what would I do? I'd want to share my song with you. And you could keep going with different tonal patterns. You could do duple meter, triple meter, things like that. Now, when we go to macro beats and micro beats, what I like to do for this particular song, there's a few, but I like this one. So I have a friend and his name is Baba. You can actually, I don't know if there's a Whole Foods in your area, but Whole Foods carries really nice puppets. So does Amazon. So let me scooch on. I'm going to keep it right here for a minute. So students really like to sing with puppets, especially this one. His trunk goes up and down. It's super interactive. The song that I'm going to use now is My Mom and Your Mom. You can also call it My Friend and Your Friend. That works out too, to be as inclusive as possible. My mom and your mom live across the way. When they get together, this is what they say. At first, I'm going to have a conversation with my puppet to kind of like show the big picture. And then I'm going to work with students individually. So it'll be ba, 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 ba. Ba, 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 ba. Ba, 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 ba. Ba, 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 ba. Ba 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 ba. Ba 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 ba. Ba 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 ba. Ba 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 ba. So now it'll be your turn to help Baba with his singing. So then we would go through the song again. My mom and your mom live across the way. When they get together, this is what they say. I duck behind Baba for this one so that it's just the kids and the elephant together. So you could do it as a group or you could do it individually. Sometimes what I do for students that need it, I'll only do maybe like 2 different rhythms and I'll just repeat them. Especially if students are having a hard time getting it the first time, I'll just repeat it again. So it'll be like ba, 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 ba. Ba, 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 ba. Ba, 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 ba. Ba, 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 ba. Oh, and then afterwards, I like to do like an ending. So just singing the song one more time and allowing students to say goodbye to Baba. You could say goodbye, Baba. Bye, bye. There's our ending. So now, let's scooch on to silence. Silence is okay. Silence is okay. Silence does not mean that you're not learning. Silence does not mean that students are not paying attention. Silence can just mean that they're taking everything in, that they're kind of absorbing, for lack of better words, absorbing what is happening in class and allowing to have that time to process. Sometimes students need extra time to kind of check out class and get used to it and to kind of see what's expected before they start participating. I've had students that were in this absorption phase, this silence phase for 3 years before they started participating. So keep going. I mean, I've had students that I've had for 5 years before they start matching pitch. So keep going, keep providing, keep doing, because the student it'll happen. It'll happen. You just have to be patient. Another thing that I like to do is this book, Brown Bear, Brown Bear. For this book, there are many different ways to respond. Students could sing the entire thing. Let me grab my ukulele. They could sing or fill in words. They could sing the part at the end that sounds like me. So let me just show you. This would be the teacher part. Brown bear, what do you see? This would be the student part. I see a red bird looking at me. So students could sing that whole thing. They could also fill in the word red bird, or just one of the two, red or bird. They could also, I have students that are nonverbal. So at the end, we practice pointing to ourselves because that's where they are. I'm meeting them right where they are at. So my part would be, I see a red bird looking at me, or looking at, and then I would gesture to point to themselves, me. But I also make it so that it's kind of like, the red bird is responding and then he's now getting a question asked. So you could do this for the entire book, but you don't have to. So it would be red bird, what do you see? And then the next one after red bird. It just depends on where your students are at. Don't be afraid to offer nonverbal responses during an activity like this for students that are nonverbal. Don't shy away from verbal activities just because students are nonverbal. There are many different ways for students to respond that don't require words that can still be meaningful. So choice boards are the next thing I want to talk about. These are some awesome choice boards that we use at BIASN, the Berklee Institute for Arts Education and Special Needs. We use different things like fruits, animals, body parts, actions, movements, anything that goes with our songs. Like the mango song that I sang earlier. That last part where it goes, banana, 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 cherry. Sometimes we change that part and say, what fruit would you like to sing about next? And these are Velcroed, so students can just pull off an answer and show us what they would like to sing about next. The choice boards provide a lot of participation, they provide independence, and they allow students to communicate their needs and feelings. Here's a choice board that I made for my students at NECC. So this is the advanced choice board. It has all of the instruments that we use. It has some basic instruments from different families. This is a little bit more for older students. We're not going to be doing really the narwhal song for older students, so I might pick a different kind of vocalization song. Same thing for Brown Bear, Brown Bear. I wouldn't be doing that with students that are 15. I would pick another kind of song that they could vocalize or put a vocal expression into. I also provide rhythm notation because we do an activity that has rhythm notation in it. I made a chorus board for a student that had hand signs so that they could sing through hand signs because I do have a nonverbal student in chorus. We also did colors, letters, numbers, I don't like it, more, all done, things that are super important to music class. And this last one I did for when we studied music in Brazil. We watched the Rio Carnival, or at least like a 1-minute highlight of the 2019 Carnival. And I asked them, what did you see? What did you see during the parade? And they had the opportunity to circle and tell me what they saw. So it's just a nice opportunity for students to be able to tell me what they saw, whether they could vocalize it or not. So, differentiation and participation. Every student is different. Every student needs something. I have students that would be considered low support need, but have a really hard time keeping beat, or have a really hard time playing a rhythm or alternating their hands. So every student is different. We just have to have a growth mindset. And, you know, if the mindset is always, I don't know if my student can do that. I don't know. What can they do? Let's change it. Let's change our terminology, our words. What can they do? What's going to give my student accessibility? What's going to give them success? Group classes are super important for group skills. Leisure skills are one of the things that they're important for, among a million different cognitive and developmental ideas and skills that they could gain. Some of my classes are very clinical because I do work at a clinical school. So I use as many specialists as I can. For chorus class, I partnered with the speech department. For piano class, I partnered with the OT department. So we now do exercises to increase finger dexterity, to increase coordination, things like that. So these are all group skills that students are getting and receiving from music class. So we just always have to have a growth mindset. And as hard as it may be, differentiating per student per class is hard to do, but for the most part, I would say that's how most classes are. We have to differentiate per class. Like sometimes I have younger students, sometimes I have older students. And then I have to differentiate per student in class. So Xander needs to be different than Wyatt, and Wyatt needs to be different than Maya. So I try and provide as many accommodations, adaptations, modifications as I can. And the main point is just to have some support, whether it's just yourself and you're providing supports for yourself, or whether it's working with teachers and other people in other departments. Sometimes I work with the classroom teachers in order to figure out different strategies on how to work with a certain student. Like I've noticed that this student has a hard time stopping. What do you guys do to promote learning how to stop? So things like that, starting and stopping is very important. We need to learn how to do both. Sometimes the classroom teachers have plans listed out on how they're going to do this. So sometimes it's great to communicate with other staff. So participation, not perfection. That is exactly what I look forward to in my classes. I tell this to every support staff or parent that walks into my classroom. You know, we're not looking for perfection, people. We are looking for participation. Like, no worries. If it's not perfect, that's okay. They're learning. It's only the first time or the second time. Maybe it's the 100th time. It doesn't have to be perfect. They just have to enjoy what they're doing and want to participate. So, even if prompting, modeling, even if you need to do these things, that's okay. It's just allowing for student success. And allowing for student choice and freedom gives a little bit more of an open environment for students to be able to express themselves. Engagement can look like a lot of different things. It can look like paying attention all the time. It could look like not paying attention. It could look like walking around the room. We actually had a student that was laying on the floor who you would think during a movement activity, they're not participating. However, he was tapping his feet to the beat that we were playing. So he was participating even though he didn't look like it. So you kind of have to look forward to what is meaningful for that particular student. There's a lot of different props and instruments that we use. I like to use a lot of tubanos. Tubanos are my favorite drum to use. We have an activity called hi-ho, and it gives an opportunity for rhythmic tonal rhythmic patterns, and it gives an opportunity for keeping a steady beat. Usually we would have drums set up in a circle and kind of like walk around the drums and stop as soon as the song stopped so that you could be right in front of a drum. However, since we don't have a circle of drums today, what we can do while I'm singing this song is pat our legs. Pat your legs, pat your legs. Hi-ho, here we go, round in a circle and away we go. Hi-ho, here we go, find a drum and then echo. Hi-ho. ho, here we go, round in a circle and away we go. Hi, ho, here we go, find a drum and then echo. So now for our drumming patterns, we could have pretty much anything. What I like to start out with, because I use this for all ages, is a drum roll as fast as you can for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, however many seconds you want to do it for. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and stop. And build up anticipation. There we go. And then do it again. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then back to your patting your legs. Hi ho, here we go, around in a circle and away we go. Hi ho, here we go, find a drum and then echo. Hi ho, here we go, around in a circle and away we go. Hi ho, here we go, find a drum and then echo. The next rhythm is going to be just like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, your turn. My turn. 1, 2, 3, 4, your turn. My turn. Pie, pie, apple pie, your turn. My turn. Pie, pie, apple pie, your turn. Back to tapping your legs. So you could go on like this forever and ever and ever, going back and forth between doing a drum roll and back and forth between doing patterns, just working with the students that you have. Sometimes I have students in older classrooms that need to do more simpler patterns because that's what we're working on. Sometimes I do touching different body parts and then hitting the drum or their legs. So I'll do like shoulders, legs, legs, your turn, shoulders, and then they repeat. You could even do like head, shoulders, your turn. Different ways for students to like get in there, learning different patterns. So head, shoulders is still a pattern. That's still a rhythm. We're just touching different body parts. Provide enough time for students to be able to do it. If you see that students are a little bit slower to respond, maybe don't go as quick. Maybe just wait just a little bit longer for students to be able to finish and then go back through it. So don't underestimate your students is a huge thing. Not underestimating your students, it just provides a lot more growth mindset for them. We want to make sure that we keep growth mindset because we're only hindering our students. They get a lot of underestimation from everybody else. Let's not be that on top of it. So what I would like to do now is kind of go through a little bit of what a class would look like for my end. What I'm going to do is just stop my share. I'll share it back in a minute, but I'm just going to stop my share. And let me put this down just for a moment. So I'm going to start with our hello song, go through what a body warm-up is going to be like, going through our vocalizations, a movement activity, and then goodbye. So here we go, friends. Now you can do these all with me. I found the best way to learn to do any of these things, learning new things for me at least, doing it is the best way. Time for music, tidy-o. Time for music, tidy-o. Jingle at the window, tidy-o. Jingle at the window, tidy-o. Jingle-in, 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 Joe. Jingle at the window, tidy-o. Jingle at the window, tidy-o. Now, the first thing that we need to do is move our arms, get ourselves ready for music. Just let me move in the early morn. Just let me move in the early morn. Just let me move in the early morn, and I'll never sleep late anymore. And now let's send it to our head. Move your head side to side. Just let me move my head today. Just let me move my head today. Just let me move my head today, and I'll never sleep late anymore. Now, what I would like us to do is send it down to our hands. Rub your hands together. Just let me move my hands today. Just let me move my hands today. Just let me move my hands today, and I'll never sleep late anymore. And now clap, clap, clap your hands. I have learned that clapping your hands is very good for sensory and drawing attention to hands. Just let me clap in the early morn. Just let me clap in the early morn. Just let me clap in the early morn, and I'll never sleep late anymore. All right. Now, I want to provide really quickly what I do for piano ensemble as a warm-up. The warm-ups that I do in piano class involve drumming really hard on a table, drawing attention to hands by touching them and squeezing them. The first one we did where I sang, that was for a general music class. This one would be for piano. So touching, squeezing your hands, squeeze them both together, and then pop your hands out. Squeeze your hands together and pop your hands out. Clapping your hands really hard provides that tingling sensation that students might need for sensory purposes. And then after that, you can have them rub their hands, drum on the table as hard as they can. And one of the last things that we do is touching one finger at a time. Now, this is super difficult. For students that have limited finger dexterity, this is super difficult. However, this is an OT, occupational therapy. This is an occupational therapy exercise that most students go through if they need help with finger dexterity. I tell parents and teachers that it is okay to help. It's okay to help facilitate this, because a lot of students will be able to do this, and when they go to use their other fingers, sometimes they'll just close them all. And that's just, having a little bit of limited dexterity. Make sure you do it on both sides, because in music, like everybody knows, what we do to one side, we have to do to the other to make it even. If students need a very bigger, a more challenging role, you can have them do it together, both hands at the same time. But these are all really important skills that you would need for piano class. So now that we are all warmed up for general music and piano, what I would like to do is we are going to be doing a movement exercise. So I'll stand up. You guys can stay seated if you would like to, but I want to show you what it looks like for standing up purposes. Now, my colleague told me that, or my colleague Miles, I should say, he told me that he briefly did Larry the Llama, and that I should do it again for you guys so that I could explain the activity. But Larry the Llama, I don't have that specific llama. However, get really into the storyline. Pretend that Larry is like a person and that he likes to do special things. So we kind of go to the kids and we say, Larry likes to do a lot of things, and the first thing that he likes to do is walk. Can you walk with Larry? Now, what you can do is ask students, can you tap your feet on the floor to my beat? And you can have students walk in place, especially for COVID right now, or you can have them walk when we're past COVID, I guess, or if you have limited amount of students in your class, you can have them walk in a circle around the room, whatever you need to do. Larry the Llama walks, and Larry the Llama walks, and Larry the Llama walks, then Larry the Llama stops. Larry the Llama walks, and Larry the Llama walks, and Larry the Llama walks, then Larry the Llama stops. And then you could do, another favorite is jumping. Larry the llama jumps, and Larry the llama jumps, and Larry the llama jumps, then Larry the llama stops. We usually do everything twice just to give students an extra chance to do it. My favorite part is when Larry the llama gets so tired and he has to go to sleep. So students can pretend like they're sleeping. Larry the llama sleeps, and Larry the llama sleeps, and Larry the llama sleeps, and Larry the llama stops. And then he wakes up, and then he moves fast. You can have them move their feet really fast or run around the room, whatever is most COVID safe for your school. Larry the llama moves fast, Larry the llama moves fast, Larry the llama moves fast, Larry the llama stops. The best part about this activity is building up anticipation from going from slow moving to fast moving, back to slow moving, then to fast moving. Then maybe you can do another fast moving, kind of switch it up. Another activity that I like to do for movement that I've done with both older classes and younger classes. It's kind of like a little bit of a jazzy tune. It's called First You Move. Here we go. First you move, then you move, then you move, then you stop. And then you move, then you move, then you move, then you stop. And then you move, then you move, then you move, then you stop. And then you move, 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 then you stop. You could do anything from like, heavy and light, like, I'm moving through a pool of honey. I gotta move through it. So you can do anything that you would like with that one. It just practices starting and stopping. We also give students choices. I also give students choices that, what movement do you want to do next? How else would you like to move? And then they can have opportunities either with a choice board or a device or by vocally telling us, this is what I would like to do. So those are two different movement activities that you could do. There we go. All right. So the next activity would be doing some of our puppet movements. So my puppet guy again. All right, friends. My friend and your friend live across the way. When they get together, this is what they say. Ba 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 ba. Ba 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 ba. Ba 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 ba. So another thing, sometimes students get a little bit shy and sometimes they need a little bit of extra prompting. So a prompt that I like to do for students is point to my mouth, ba, ba, ba. Like really emphasize and show your mouth. And sometimes if you do ba, like putting your finger out like this, like this, so that it's kind of indicating that the sound needs to come out. So this sound, ba, just like that. Sometimes students will make other sounds, and that's okay. I want you to repeat those sounds. I have a student that instead of saying ba, says ma with an M. So I just changed it. So ma, 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 ma. You can change it to any other basic syllable that you would like. You can change it to ta, la, anything that you would like. But ba and ma are the most accessible for beginning learners. So B and M are the two most accessible syllables. Okay. So after we would do vocal, we would go back to doing some movement activities. And then we would jump down to our jam session. And during our jam session, the only thing that we really kind of do is just play the ukulele in different time signatures, different keys, things that'll be super exciting for students. So it's basically like we tell students, all right, you guys can choose whatever instrument that you would like to take out right now. And then we kind of like just play a little bit of background music and allow them to kind of experiment with their instruments. Sometimes there comes a point in our jam sessions where we say, can you repeat my pattern? So there's a lot of different ways that working in different areas can dive into your music. So we did a little bit of rhythmic patterns with that while we were listening to the jam session, while all students had instruments. And most of the time students are choosing different instruments. So we're also generalizing techniques. Like if a student picked up rhythm sticks and we, play this pattern, and then they took their rhythm sticks. Well, now there's another student that also has their shaker. Okay, well, this isn't gonna work on your shaker. How else are we gonna make that? 1, 2, 3. So students are generalizing, oh, how do I do this when I clap? How do I do this when I do rhythm sticks? How do I do this when I have a shaker? How do I do this when I have a beanbag? How do I do this if I don't have any instruments? So generalization of skills is super important. Last thing I wanted to share with you guys, there's that. I have a few resources. I put my contact information. I also put some of the things that we talked about today, the video that I used for tier questioning, that Ray Charles video. It's really fun to watch, regardless if you want to use it for teaching. UDL guidelines, the website to Berklee Institute for Arts Education and Special Needs, the website for New England Center for Children, my interactive classroom that I made, which is still a work in progress, but it was an interactive classroom that I made for the pandemic. Lesson Picks is a clip art for classes. I think it was made by an SLP, a speech person. But I use a lot of the visuals that you saw today, if they looked like they were hand drawn, are from Lesson Picks. And there's a lot of customization that you can do there. And the last thing that I put is the Gordon Institute for Music Learning, just to give you more of a context of what I was talking about with acculturation and assimilation and everything like that. Thank you guys so much. This is all I have for today.
Thank you, Nadia. We have a little bit of time. If there are questions that people have that they would like to put in the chat, you can moderate that.
I'm gonna unshare.
There are some comments, but let's see if we've got any questions either that will come in the Q&A. I see a question in the Q&A. Where do you find your images?
Lesson Picks. I think Jennifer already said Lesson Picks in the one underneath it, and SLP and augmentative and alternative communicative, blah, blah, blah. I would highly recommend lessonpicks.com if you need a tool to make visual supports. That is exactly what I use. All of those hand-drawn pictures are Lesson Picks. I also I do a lot of Googling. And I Google random things. I Google the word support, and I try and find whatever picture best encompasses what I'm trying to explain. But if they were the hand-drawn pictures, then it's Lesson Picks.
Question: how would you show putting away the drums in a picture?
That's a really good example. Putting away the drums, I would show where the drum, it could be, okay, so it could be 2 separate pictures or 1 picture. It depends on the student. For 2 separate pictures, I would show where the drums are lined up on, because I line my drums up on a wall. and I would show where a missing drum would be. So let's say I had 4 drums and my picture looked like this. Like, oh, there's a drum that's missing right here. So the next picture I would show that drum being put back. I don't know if that made any sense. Did that make sense? Okay.
I see what you're
Yeah,
talking.
so without the drum and with the drum. So then you can kind of do like a first then, or like a step 1, step 2. You could also do a task analysis, so kind of teaching students how to put away their drum. So step 1, pick up the drum with both hands. Step 2, walk across the room. Step 3, put the drum I mean, there's a lot more steps involved in that, and depends on the ability of the student, but you could also make it a task analysis. The one picture I was talking about would just show all of the drums lined up on the wall, and you could say like, I don't know, I don't think the wall looks like this picture yet, I think there needs to be another drum.
So one thing I'm going to ask for both of our presenters is to share your slides with me today, so that I can send them out in the mailings that I send out on Monday. And there's a question of whether the songs will be included. So
Include them.
that would be fantastic. Fantastic. Any other questions from attendees or comments that Nadia can respond to? Lots of good hands-on suggestions. Thank you. Thank you. People love your generosity.
Oh, no problem. I'm happy to share anything.
So,
Also, I'm just realizing, I apologize. In the interactive classroom, the link that I put on there, a lot of the songs that I did today are there. At least just sometimes it's just a recording, sometimes it's a video that includes an activity. So I will send that link as well.
fabulous. Yeah, if you just send me by email all of your materials, try to do it today. I can
Perfect.
organize it and get it out to everybody on Monday. This is fantastic. Why don't we do this? Gretchen is ready to roll. Why don't we start Gretchen a speck early, but let's give ourselves a 3-minute stretch break. Stay on Zoom. Don't go anywhere. You can turn off, you can turn off your video, although the participants already had their videos off, but our presenters can turn off their video if they wish. Let's stretch for 3 minutes. I have 10:52. At 10:55, we will be back with Gretchen. Sound good? So refill your coffee, stretch, and we'll see you in 3 minutes. Starting again in 3 minutes. Thanks, everyone. Okay. I have 10:55. We have Gretchen back. I would like to introduce to all of you Gretchen Hary. Gretchen is a percussionist and a music educator who lives in Connecticut. She is a graduate of our graduate certificate in music education and autism. And yes, she and Nadia were part of our very first cohort of students that started in 2014. The programs are still going very strong. We have some terrific students, a very exciting group. So I want to hand things over to Gretchen. She's going to take us into the world of drum set and percussion and share a lot of what she has learned in her work. So take it away, Gretchen.
Thank you, Dr. Bernard. It's wonderful to be here. So I'm just going to start off. I'm going to share my screen with everybody. Go. All right. So I'm going to introduce a little bit of myself. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Yes, so my background is in actually more performance than education, but I got bachelor's of music and percussion performance from Boston Conservatory. Then I did percussion pedagogy at Belmont University in Nashville. And then of course the graduate certificate program at Boston Conservatory at Berklee. I've been at Neighborhood Music School, which is a community music school or community arts school in New Haven, Connecticut. I've been there since 2006, and I do private lessons, classes, percussion ensemble. I did a little bit of theory for a while as well. I also teach right across the street at ACES Educational Center for the Arts, which is a magnet arts high school. And I do music theory, musicianship, percussion technique, rhythm class, which is turned into a percussion ensemble, which you can actually see on the screen there, which is mainly non-percussionists. And then I also this year started with a rock band as well. And then I just teach adjunct faculty at Thomas Edison Middle School in Meriden, and I just help out with the orchestras and the bands there. So today what I want to talk to you about is some drum notation, as well as the drum circles. And I want to start off first, I'm going to be a little transparent here, that if we were in person, if this was a normal year, you would be ready to be woken up. You would be in a circle, you would have all these drums surrounding you to choose from. It would be hands-on, we would be jamming out, we'd be having lots of fun. It's a little different this year, coming to you over Zoom. And I'll be honest, it was very hard for me to figure out how to present this to you in a way that would still be interesting and engaging. And I probably waited much longer than I should have to put this together. Because I was so overwhelmed, I just had no idea where to start with this. It was so foreign. I'm like, I usually use music to communicate, and now I actually have to use words. And I was just like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to explain it if I just can't physically show you what I'm doing? Nadia just did an amazing job physically showing you as well as showing you on screen. And she's a hard act to follow because she's so amazing. So then I was thinking to myself, you know what? This is what our students who think differently, this is how they feel every single day. And they're trying to keep up with everyone else in the classroom. They want to be successful, but sometimes the way that we are teaching them or we're asking them to do things is so foreign and it's overwhelming for them. And they might come across as lazy because they don't start that project or they're not joining in, when really they're just so overwhelmed they don't know how to. So how can we help them? How can we teach them? So one thing that we know that students definitely struggle with is reading music. So we all have that, whether it's in our private studios or in the classroom. And it's hard enough when it's in a private studio, one-on-one, trying to teach the student how to read music, but even more so challenging when you've got them in a full classroom. So now I ask you this, how many of you have students who have trouble with decoding? Now, this will be something that you will have seen on their 504 or their IEP. Decoding is the process of translating print into speech by rapidly matching a letter or combination of letters to their sounds and recognizing the patterns that make the syllables work. So there's many wonderful strategies and aids in place for helping the students learn how to read, for learning to decode, because it's so important. It's the foundation on which all other reading instruction builds. But if students cannot decode words, their reading will lack fluency, their vocabulary will be limited, and their reading comprehension will suffer. So now think of it this way. Look at a note on the page, associate the pictured note with its name, the sound or the length, the pitch, hold that sound in your mind, blend it together with what else is in the measure to determine what the music will sound like. What strategies do you have in place for helping the students who have trouble decoding to learn this music? This can be challenging for sure. Now, add drum set notation into the mix. Right? Each line and space that we are used to representing a pitch, a letter name, now represents a different drum. Also keep in mind that that can change depending on the publisher or the piece that you're working on. So for instance, this was percussion notation. And if you look at letter E, there's some X's being represented for different spaces, which represent a sound that is happening on a specific drum, which is different than the drums on this line in space in this piece of music. Then we have the different notation of the note heads. So using an X. So for example, in this picture, the X's are representing symbols, but in symbols as in C for symbols. Whereas in the previous example, those X's were actually on drums saying play on the rims. I've seen a triangle used to represent a triangle, but I've also seen a triangle note head used to represent a tambourine. So now we're just confusing them even further. Right? Then we have the rhythm itself. So trying to explain to a student, well, this is a whole note and it gets held out for 4 beats, and this is a half note gets held up for 2. That can be challenging. But now do it on a drum. When you hit the drum, the sound does not sustain. But yet if I hit the cymbal, the sound will sustain. So it can be extremely difficult for them to grasp this just in, regular pitch notation on a clarinet compared to when we're adding it to percussion. So I wanted to help my students. So I thought to myself, I have this idea. I'm going to come up with a way to assist students in learning the notation, giving them aids in place, just like we have for them when they're learning to read and doing their decoding when reading. So I got together with a friend because I have no computer technology experience or knowledge whatsoever, and explained my idea to him. And we kind of created a little something. I said, I wanted to create not just notation, but a computer program that's going to assist these students. And what I wanted to do was break down the steps to decode the rhythm. I wanted to use more visual to make it easier to comprehend, and then gradually transition them over by using fading to reading the standard rhythmic notation and pitch notation. So I was going to use some graphics and colors and shapes in place of the standard notation. So when I put that together, this is what I first came up with. So you can see that I have the traditional notation still on top of the screen. And again, because my notation is just an aid to the standard notation, I've got the different colors representing the different pitches. And then the blocks are used to represent the rhythm or the length of the note. You'll see light gray vertical lines, those represent the beats in the measure. So our first 2 notes you can see are quarter notes because they take up the entire space between those light gray vertical lines. So they equal 1 beat each. And then you can see the second half of the measure is filled with 1 block, so the half note, and it's going over 2 of those vertical line spaces to show that that note is going to last longer than the 2 individual previous notes. I have a yellow line that you see going down the middle. That's kind of the metronome. It's going to keep the pulse of the music. The notation and the music is going to move while that line stays stationary. And then as I'm going to play this so you can see what it looks like going forward, you'll see the blocks will also increase in size and shrink for where I have the different dynamics. Right away, you'll notice the one thing missing is sound. And the reason for that is, again, this was prototype number 1, so we did not have sound at the time. So I decided that dealing with the pitch and the rhythm both at the same time was kind of too big of an area to focus on. So I decided I was just going to focus on rhythm. And I had gotten some feedback from students who had even suggested using different colors to represent the rhythms getting faster, like red might be the fastest. And as you slow down, you fade from the reds into the oranges into the yellows. So I tried a lot of different things, but then ultimately I decided, being a percussionist, I'm just going to start with drum set. So I went on to trying to just figure out how can I just show this rhythm and help students with the drum set notation. So again, I'm using colors to represent the drums. So I started with just a small kit. So we've got bass drum, snare drum, and hi-hat. Hi-hat's orange, snare drum is green, and bass drum is blue. Just randomly picked those colors because I've been using them with a student in a class. I've split the screen into 3 sections. So the top part of the screen is the standard drum notation, and that's going to scroll just like the previous screen from left to right. And you'll see that yellow line will stay stationary, marking our time. The bottom of the screen, of course, is the pictures of the drums. And I liked that because even if you can't remember which color belongs to which drum, you've got the picture of what the instrument looks like. So you can be like, oh, that's right, that's the bass drum. This is the snare drum. Then the middle of the screen is our blocks representing the rhythms. In this particular instance, they're all quarter notes, so they're all the same size blocks. But you can see that there is now a dotted light gray line going across representing the 8th note. So when and if I do go down to 8th notes, I can easily keep those blocks separated and looking nice and evenly spaced. So in this instance, you can see though, where the green and the orange share the same space. So they're going to be hit at the same time with the first line, which is the blue and the orange, the bass drum and the hi-hat. So what's going to happen is that yellow line is going to stay stationary, and the blocks are actually going to scroll from the top of the screen to the bottom of the screen. And I actually based this off of the Guitar Hero games. Also figuring that if the students could recognize something from a video game, it might be a little easier for them because they seem to pick up on video games really fast. So this is what in motion this looks like. And you can see where these colors are hitting that yellow line at the same time. Now, one of the things I don't like is that the picture of the instruments disappeared. And again, that was a coding thing. So if I have somebody who knows how to do that a little bit better, we might be able to keep those instruments there, and the lack of sound. So there's a lot more that I would definitely need to do on this project. So I ultimately wanted it to be accessible on all types of all types of electronic devices. So not just Chromebooks and computers and laptops, but also for touch screens. So somebody could have it on their phone if they wanted, or an iPad, or whatever that device they have. I like the ability to do the touch screen so that they could physically, when you're just working on rhythm, have those blocks and have them touching the screen and holding it down for the same length of the block to get comfortable with how long that actually gets held out for, especially being drums where you're not hearing that sound and where you're just hitting it once. It's a half note, I can hold it down and then release, hold it down, compared to the quarter note, which will be a little bit faster. Obviously, I would want there to be sound so that they have feedback to hear what they're playing, sound so they have feedback to hear what's happening on the screen, to give examples of it. Then I would want the capability of them being able to record themselves playing. There's a lot of programs out there that do that. I know even Essential Elements is doing that now online. We run into the issues with microphones of having a good quality microphone, or when you're recording something and you have that delay, that can even happen with the touchscreen, which can be very frustrating for a student if they know, I know I'm right, but it's telling you you're wrong because it's a fraction of a second late. So that would be something to look into. How can we get it to the coding to accept that there might be that slight delay? I would want it to go through levels. So level 1 would definitely be starting, with just introducing a few notes and having all the aids in place of having the blocks of the different sizes, plus the standard notation. And then as it increases, you go through the different more challenging rhythms, but also fading away some of those blocks and just having the standard notation there. And then, of course, making it accessible for all. So making sure that visually and audibly it will work for everybody that it needs to. So this is obviously a work in progress. So then the question becomes, well, what can I do now? What can work in my class or in my studio at the moment? Colored notation has always been a 100% go-to thing. Not only, as Nadia had mentioned, that it's hard sometimes to just see the black and white on top of each other, especially when you're in the schools with the lighting. But color can also help you to recognize, in this case, different instruments. So orange representing cymbals, the green representing the snare drum, the blue representing the bass drum. Then I just threw in some different colors for the toms, the pink, the yellow, and the purple. And you can see that yellow is not a color to use, especially not this light of a color. And so you have to kind of play around with what's going to show up nicely. As far as the notation, I kept with the X's because we use X's so much when it comes to the symbols on percussion instruments. So it's just, it also helped to make it a little bit different. Right now with a colleague, we're working on creating more notation using different shapes, but then we'll fade those shapes to standard notation. So we're trying to come up with shapes that we don't normally see, like the diamonds and the triangles and stuff, but stars and hearts and things like that. And also the thing that I like with the colors, and ultimately what we're going to do with the shapes, again, the shapes are there because if somebody has is colorblind or has trouble seeing color, then you've got those shapes as that they can identify with, thinking of universal design. So one of the things you can do, whether it's the shape or the colors, is you can also create something to put on the drums themselves that are that same color. Like, so for instance, in this case, maybe a yellow dot, an orange dot or a green dot or a blue dot. And I would place those on the actual instruments. So then the student's also seeing, oh, here's orange. So even if they don't know the X is the hi-hat and this is what a hi-hat is and this is what it's called. But the colored notation I have used with a couple of my students, one has already faded out completely and is just back to the standard black and white notation. Another one, we just use the colors, but what's great about it is I always have a handheld dry erase board in the studio where I teach and colored markers, and I can just quickly write any rhythm I want and not have to worry about having a staff to say, oh, well, the third space, that's the snare drum. Just by the colors, they know exactly what drum they're supposed to hit and which one I'm representing. So it makes it much easier as a teacher to just be able to come up with writing down rhythms or grooves on the spot and having the student work on them. So this has really been real successful. It doesn't show the boxes for the rhythms, but that would be a separate thing that I would do. I have graph paper that I can keep in the classroom as well, and I can shade things in and we can do it looking at it that way. Again, because of the colors, I don't have to keep it on the staff. So it makes it much easier for me to be able to show them that length. Okay, you hit the drum here. Now we're just going to pretend that that sound is still lasting for this length of time. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit. And the one great thing about drum programs or drum circles is that we don't have to worry about notation. So we're going to switch over now. Many of you have probably already used drums in your classes. Maybe you already do versions of drum circles. And depending on the students that you have, the abilities, maybe you have great successful drum circles and it's fantastic and you're getting these wonderful grooves happening and lots of things, you know, communication between students with the instruments. Or maybe you just have lots of noise and you walk out of there with a headache at the end of the day. But I've designed a drumming program that allows everyone to participate and succeed. It works with mixed levels. And if you have aides or paras in the room, they can also join in, and I encourage them actually to join in. So it's called CSI drumming. The CSI stands for communication, socialization, and inclusion. So the goal of this drumming program is actually to develop the communication and socialization skills while being inclusive. So I'm going to give you first just a brief background on how the program was developed. So as I mentioned, I work at Neighborhood Music School, which is a community school down in New Haven, Connecticut. And we were approached in 2011 by Chapel Haven to provide some music for their students. Now, Chapel Haven is a school for adults 18 and older with developmental and social disabilities. It offers 3 core residential programs to each individual to help them live independent lives. So the school was interested in a couple music things, but one of those that they wanted was a drum circle. So they asked if I would be interested in facilitating a drum circle for them. And as we know, one of the reasons is because drum circles have such therapeutic effects on individuals. So they're used for health and communication. They help with stress. They're commonly used in nursing homes, hospitals, schools, also used, companies use them for team building exercises as well. So I brought in some drums and I loosely facilitated a drum circle over a 4-week period during the first summer. And I say loosely facilitated because I had no training on being a drum facilitator. I was literally going off of my knowledge as a drummer and my knowledge as as a teacher, and the few drum circles that I had actually, attended throughout my life. So after the 4 sessions ended, I was actually approached by the speech and language pathologist, Sarah Davison at Chapel Haven. So she was interested in incorporating a drum circle in connection with a class that she was teaching on communication and socialization for individuals with ASD. So she wanted to use the drums as a way to highlight the topics that she was discussing in class. So I was like, okay, I told her I didn't really have all that much experience, but she loved what I did and she thought we would work great together. So we designed a program and it was 18 weeks long and it took place during the school's spring semester. So in the beginning, I completely follow Sarah's lead. Like I said, I had little knowledge about the drum circles, but I also had little knowledge about ASD and how individuals on the spectrum communicated. So it was successful enough that she asked me to keep doing it with her. So each year after the session ended, we would get together and we would talk about what worked, what didn't. She might say, I want to highlight this. This is something that I'm doing in the class, and this is a topic that I'm trying to get through to them. What kind of activity could you come up with that we could do this with? So because I'm such a big person on, if I don't know how to do something, I'm going to research it and figure out how to do it. And that's this time I also decided to go back to school. And that's when I went and got the graduate certificate program in music and autism at Boston Conservatory at Berklee. So I did some research while I was there. I worked on a thesis. And during this time, I did lots of review on literature for ASD as well as drum circles. I interviewed some prominent drum facilitators. I also observed drum circles, all different kinds of drum circles, some that were just community, open drum circles, some that were actually for students with special needs. So through the research, I've only just scratched the surface on how to understand communication and language of individuals with ASD. We already know that previous research has shown that drumming and rhythm can reduce stress and have calming effects. But I also found that it's possible for someone with ASD that they might find drumming quiets the mind, helps them eliminate sensory overload, and allows them to get lost in the rhythm. And there was research by Jeff Strong who showed that by using drums, individuals actually may find a gateway in rhythm that allows them to become aware of other people, to make eye contact, to have joint attention, and to initiate conversation. And if you ever teach anyone on the spectrum drums, you'll find this is definitely true. I have so many of my students who are so much more talkative when they leave the room. So there's obviously something very powerful about drumming, and it brings everyone into focus with this joint attention. And of course, allows us to communicate without words getting in the way too, which is very nice. So I developed this program. It's basically based on the 1-hour sessions that I had done with those at Chapel Haven over an 8-week time, but it's really just a guideline. I mean, you can pick and choose, you can make it longer, you can make it shorter, just based off of who you have and what you're doing. So it's on the idea of 7 to 20 participants. The activities that I use are mainly, at first, were taken from some well-known facilitators, one being Arthur Hull, who, if you haven't heard of him, he's kind of known as the father of the modern facilitated drum circle. And he actually does teach and certify those in the way of facilitating drum circles. So if you're ever interested in getting a certification in facilitation, you can do that. The other is Kalani Das, who's also a percussionist, board certified music educator and therapist. And he's the founder of World Drum Club, which they also do certification for drum facilitators as well. So I just mentioned that twice, drum certification for becoming a drum facilitator. So the question is, do you have to go and do that? If you want to do drum circles that are going to be for people who are in nursing homes or specific companies to help with team building and things like that, then yes, I think you probably do need to go and get certified. For the program that I'm going to show you today that I've created, I don't think that it's important to do that. I don't think you need to do that. And the reason being is that it's basically designed to be used by music teachers. So you're doing what you do on a daily basis. You're going to give instruction and tools to the students on how to do the activity. Then you're going to allow them to do that activity where they're going to communicate with each other, use critical thinking, be present and in the moment and grow. And then you'll come back. What did we learn from this? So you're doing what you do naturally. You're teaching. So therefore, I don't think that you necessarily need to be certified in any type of facilitation in order to do this program. So just some things to keep in mind as you go, as I talk through all of this, is that you're going to have to adjust everything depending on the group. I had to adjust not even just every year, but sometimes daily, depending on who was in the circle. Sometimes you have everybody that comes to class, and sometimes you have a few key people who might be missing that really make the circle go really well. So if you have students who are great at, have high function and communication, and they're very social and making eye contact, that's going to be a very different circle than having the ones who struggle to make the eye contact and have extreme challenges with communication. You could have some that have a great sense of rhythm and no problem creating a groove, and then you've got others that are going to struggle just to create a beat or stay on the beat with you. So it's kind of up to us to really pick and choose in the moment. You could have this plan, and again, you're teachers, right? We have a plan when we walk in the door, and then it could all go out the window depending on things that happen. Group size will affect it. So some of the activities, you have to go around the circle and everybody takes a turn. So if you've got 7 kids, it's going to go much faster than if you've got 20. Transitioning. So some students will have trouble transitioning if you try and do multiple activities in one session. So depending on how that's going to work, and you might have to stay on one activity for an entire session. Maybe over time you can help that student with their transition and be able to move on to 2 or more activities. It will just depend. And then if you have a group that's having great success with an activity, so they really understood the concept of it, they're getting great eye contact, great communication, just everything. It's just you're all having a great time. You're seeing some smiles, maybe even come up on some of their faces. Stay on the activity. Don't move. Especially if you're like, oh, I've only got like 15 more minutes, but I had this plan to get to these other activities. Revel in that success. Revel in the fact that those students are enjoying it. They're having a great time and everything is going well. Stay there. Throw out the rest of the plans. Do them next week. So each activity that I have is laid out like this. So there's an overview, which will give you the basic description of the activity. Skill development. So it will tell you the specific skills that are used or targeted within that activity. The process, so step-by-step instructions. Then accommodations and modifications. And again, this is very important. So even though some of these activities are taken from Arthur Hall or Kalani, they're not going to give you accommodations and modifications. So they're also not going to give you skill development. So for students, accommodations and modifications will be for students who have limited mobility, sound sensitivity, unable to see or hear, or nonverbal, etc. And then the talkback. So again, this is not something that you're going to have as much with a regular facilitated drum circle. And I feel the talkback is so important because it is going to help the students realize that what they were doing, how it's going to connect with what's happening in their everyday communication and socialization. So it's really helping them to connect those things. And some activities may need to be performed again after the talkback. And even some of them I recommend, I say, do round 1 or round 2, now have a talkback, do round 3, round 4, have another talkback. And there may be some guided questions different from the first talkback compared to the second talkback. So what do you need? Chairs in a big circle. Make it so that everybody can see everybody. If you have any wheelchairs that you know are going to be there, just leave spots and enough rooms that you know you can have that person come in as well. If you're going to have more than 30, I would recommend 2 circles, an inner circle and an outer circle, and then just have kind of like leave some rows so that you can walk around and amongst them. Instruments, just use whatever you have access to. The more variety, the better, though. I love to have a mixture of different textures. So like the membrane drums, the wood, the metal, the shakers, the more different ones you can have, the better sound and grooves you're going to be able to create. I do use the Remo Comfort Sound technology. They're designed to not be overstimulating, and it's ideal for restrictive environments. They also advertise them as being accessible for people with sensitivity to sound, including those with autism and special needs. So they're great drums. They don't hurt your hands, and there's a lot of, it's a one that you're seeing pictured here comes with a lot of great variety of drums as well. The little orange things that you see are lemons shakers, but they're not as piercing as some of the other shakers that are out there, again, because they're meant to be comfort sound. Okay, so let me get you into some of these activities here. So the first one is the one that I like to use all the time in the beginning. And the reason for this is it helps me not only to get to know the students, what their name is, and try and connect to that, but also it lets me kind of assess their ability. So if somebody is going to have any physical limitations, or if someone's going to be have more challenges vocally or communication wise, eye contact, somebody who might have good rhythm, like I can assess all these things in this first activity. So the way it works is the students will be able to introduce themselves and kind of express themselves all in the same activity. So it's going to use verbal communication, nonverbal communication, joint attention, and self-expression. So the way it works, I always will demonstrate first, and we're going to go around the circle. We're going to introduce ourselves. So you're going to say your name, and then whatever instrument you have in front of you, you're going to create a sound. Does not have to be a rhythm, could be anything. So for instance, I would say, my name is Gretchen, and then I'm going to make a sound on my drum. Now the rest of the circle is going to respond. I like them to always say hi and then say the name back. So they would say, hi, Gretchen. And then they are going to try and repeat that sound the best that they can with whatever instrument they have. So they would go, hi, Gretchen, and try and repeat it back. So again, it would go like this. My name is Gretchen. Hi, Gretchen. Then it goes around the circle to the next person, and you work your way around. And we're going to do that until everybody has had a turn. So as you can already tell, well, wait a minute, not everybody may be able to say their name. Not everyone is verbal. So if you have someone who's nonverbal, if they may happen to know sign language, they can always sign their name. If they can write their name, always have a handheld dry erase board with marker. They can write their name. Or if there's someone else in the room who can say the name for them and the student is comfortable with that, you can always have that person introduce them. There may be some physical limitations. So if you have someone who can't really hold a stick, they do make, if you go to West Music, they're really great on having adapted material for students, but they do make where there's a strap that you can put around the wrist, and so they can use the stick. You can also put a shaker on their wrist so they can shake. If you have someone who is unable to move from the neck down, have them do something vocalized. So it could be, they could, sing or even just make a sound. And then as everybody responds, they can either use the same vocalization back, or they can try and make that sound on their drum and represent it on their drum. So then I always have a talkback, as I mentioned. So is there anyone who can repeat all the names? It's always a great time for somebody to shine who's got a really good memory. Or is there anybody who can repeat all of the rhythms or the sounds that were created? So sometimes maybe words are not good for somebody to recognize, and they're having trouble with that, but man, can they remember every single sound that was created for every single person. So that's always a neat one to see if someone can do that. And then I always like to go around the room and kind of pick and choose and see if somebody would like to volunteer who can point out someone in the room who they remember their name, or they remember the sound that was made. So maybe you can't do all of them. I know I couldn't do all of them, but maybe there's one that you remember, one that stood out. And so it's always great to go around and ask that as well. Moving forward, after this, there's always three things that I like to start with, which is getting them to play, calling to groove, getting them to stop, and dynamics. So it's very important that we work on this. So when students are getting them to play, to stop, and use dynamics, we're going to use non-verbal and verbal cues. And then eventually I'm going to fade out those verbal so it's just nonverbal. It's going to work on the working memory, following directions, eye gaze, reading body language, and symbolic gestures. So the first thing, even before we get them to start playing or to stop playing, is I want them to create a sound again. And so I do the rumble. And all this is just fast drumming on your instrument or shaking, just making lots of sound and lots of music. And it's always the, I always say everybody rumble, but I also hold out the hands straight and wiggle the fingers and kind of move it around like this. And so that's the rumble nonverbal cue. I'm going to show you just real quick what this will look like. So this is Christine Stevens, who is also a great drum facilitator, and she does everything very similar to the way that I do it. So while I can't jump up and down and use my drums and show you how it would look if I was standing in a circle, a lot of her video from her video. So this is the Art and Heart of Drum Circles. It's actually a book that she created, and the book came with a CD and a DVD. And so this is a snippet from that DVD.
Everybody rumble!
So as you can see, it's just making lots of noise and the fingers are going. So that's a great way to just get them making sound. So then from there, you can do some dynamics. So I always raise up for loud and I go down for soft, but I also take it a step further and I use my whole body. And part of that is because if you all of a sudden drop to the ground, you're getting everybody's attention. So even if they weren't, which more than likely they probably weren't paying too much attention to you before, again, we're trying to grab that joint attention. If you all of a sudden drop out of sight or they see a fast movement out of the corner of their eye, they're going to be like, what just happened? And you're going to get their attention by dropping to the floor. So I'll drop really close to the floor, keeping my hands down to signify quiet. And then I'll stand up. And as I get higher and higher, the arms go up until I'm all the way stretching as far as I can with my hands high in the air, trying to get them to go as loud as they possibly can. At first, sometimes I will not use verbal commands. And the reason for this is whether they realize it or not, if that joint attention is there, when I dropped down, sometimes they follow my movement without even realizing it. Their hands just kind of get closer to the drum. And as we know with drums, if you're closer to it, you don't have as far to go, you're going to get a quiet sound. As soon as you raise your hand up higher and you have a longer distance, now you're going to get that louder sound. So naturally, those are our dynamics in drumming. Down is quiet, high is going to be loud. And so if they're following my body with their hand without even realizing it, they're naturally going to get the dynamics. So sometimes I get lucky and that happens. If it doesn't, then I say, everybody quiet, 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 quiet. And I'll whisper it because now they're going to have to strain to hear me. And what are you going to do when you're straining to hear? You're going to play quieter or you're going to stop playing to what's she saying? And then as I get up, louder, louder, louder. And now, of course, I'm louder. They can play over me. So they're going to play louder as well. So again, you kind of have to feel the room, but you may be able to start that one without the verbal commands. But if you have to, then over time, take those verbal commands out. So real quick, oops, sorry. Here's what the dynamics look like. And you can see in the end there, she was getting much faster with her dynamics. And the reason for that is she was starting to create a pulse. So then they would have that pulse to groove to. Okay, so stopping, very important one, right? So again, I will explain to the students what I want them to do, get them to rumble, and then we will try the stopping cue. The stopping cue you can do one of two ways. So you may choose to do a 1, 2, 3, 4, stop, and just use a fist in the air, or you can do the big sweeping motion. So I'm using my hands across my chest and I'm coming out with my hands to show the stop. I also quite often will jump as well because it just boom, there's that stopping motion. Again, they're following your body. They see your feet hit that floor and hear that sound. Then they know, oh, okay, that's where I have to stop. And of course, I'll do that 4, 3, 2, 1, stop, or 1, 2, 3, 4, stop, however you want to say it. And I'll use the verbal. And then eventually that verbal just gets faded right on out. And all I've got going are those body gestures. And so that's forcing them also for joint attention. They're now having to keep their eye on me. Then when I want them to play again, I do 1, 2, 3, 4, play, or I could do 1, 2, back to the groove. I tend to do a lot of 1, 2, back to the groove. That's very, very common for me. So this is what it's going to look like when we put that all together. And again, the first thing to do if they are playing and you're trying to get them to stop is getting their attention. And you'll see, and again, Christine Stevens does it exactly the same way I do. So I'm in the center of the circle and I'm turning around with my body and my arms are out and I'm making eye contact with as many people as I can, trying to get their attention, making sure that they're looking at me or their attention's on me so that they're ready for the cue that I'm about to give them.
Back to the beat, go! Back to the beat, go!
You can see she just faded. So she did the fading pretty quick. You might have to, it might take 1 or 2 classes before you can even fade out the verbal commands. Again, just read your class and figure out how soon or how slow you need to do that. So some accommodations and modifications for that. Well, first off, I always ask for volunteers. Who wants to come into the center of the circle and be the leader? You may find that you have, of course, that one child that's always going to want to be the one to run into the center and do it. But I don't force anybody. I just ask for volunteers. It's a great, opportunity for them to feel that leadership and do that. I print out a diagram that I showed you of, the safe and the hands. And I'll put that all on one sheet of paper for the starting and the stopping, and it'll say start, stop. And I have that either on music stands kind of throughout the circle, or even have it where I can give it to each student. And the reason for that is some students may need that as reference to look back to. They might not be able to remember when I say it to them that, oh, that's right, that's the stopping cue or that's the starting cue, but they might need that diagram to reference back to. So I always make sure that I have those available. And then if you have someone who's visually impaired, you may need to still provide verbal cues throughout your class. You may not be able to fade at all, or you could partner that student with another student who can relay the cues as well and help them out. Or if they have a para with them, you could do that too. But you kind of just play with it and see which works best for your situation. So then again, we always do the talk back. So are you able to know what the facilitator is asking you? Were their signals clear? And did you remember the body signals and what they meant? And then if somebody else, if you did have a student who came up and demonstrated and did the starting and stopping as well, were they easy to understand? Yes or no? Sometimes it'll be no, maybe they were hesitant with their cues, or they weren't as clear with their dynamics. Maybe they kept it in a small bracket or something. So how does that make it different when we're just even in a normal situation, when you're talking and trying to get someone's attention, or, bring it back to the daily life, and then ask someone who can demonstrate and explain which each one of the steps was: loud, quiet, start, and stop. Now, you're going to find, as I mentioned before, that you're going to have some groups that just can't keep a groove, right? You know, we all would love to go in, and what we just saw with Christine Stevens, this amazing rhythm and grooves and melodies that are happening. And we all want that, but it's not going to happen right off the bat. And if you get it to happen right off the bat, you have an amazing group, and you are so lucky, and I am so jealous, but it doesn't happen like that. So one thing I like to do is have recordings playing. And this is where, oh, I forgot to mention, you need to have an audio device. So some way to play, you know, from a computer or iPad or something, and have it come out of a speaker that's going to be loud enough that you can hear it when you're drumming along. So one of the things I do is I'll use recordings, even just when they're coming in for the day, especially if it's the first drum circle that I've ever done with them. They can come in and be a little hesitant or not know what's going on. And if the music is playing, then they're going to come in and they're going to feel comfortable to explore the sound of the drums and kind of play along with the music as well. So Kalani Das has, with his book, The Amazing Jamnasium, comes with a CD and has a few tracks on there. And the first one I'm going to play for you is The Rolling into Rhythm. It's just a very simple groove that's happening that allows the students to play simple or complex over top of it. So just a very simple thing, just kind of keeps repeating. The next one is, again, Christine Stevens. So her book, The Art and Heart of Drum Circles, came with the DVD and audio tracks as well. And hers is great because she does also have ones that go into different meters. As Nadia mentioned, it's so important to get them feeling in those different meters as soon as you can. And this is a great way to do it. I'm just going to give you an example of the 4/4 groove that she has. And I do also use songs in different styles, different genres. I'll do some classical pieces, some pop pieces, some rock. I'll have students suggest pieces, and those pieces I use for jamming too. So a lot of times, once we get going a little bit more, I will use that as the first piece. We're going to jam to a piece, and you're just going to play whatever you want to play. You're just going to have fun. It's going to help you transition into this class, into this moment, being here, being present, using these drums. And so the first song I usually play of the day is just going to be a fun one. And then I also do it at the end of the circle, the end of the day, to kind of like play us out. So, okay, now we got to like calm down. So I'll usually try and pick a little bit of a slower song to kind of bring them down before they head on out at the door. But then as we progress through this circle or through the sessions, I will also allow students to suggest pieces and bring them in. And I've had some great suggestions of pieces, but sometimes I do a stipulation. It's like, okay, you can play your song, but you have to stand in the center of the circle and you have to lead the rest of the group. Lead us, you know it well, you suggested the song, so lead us in dynamics. Maybe stop us and start us in the middle of the piece, but definitely start us and stop us for the beginning and the end. And some students have no problem with that and they love doing it. Others, just no matter what, you get to the end of the weeks and they're just like, I really want to play my song, but I'm really just don't want to do that. And then it's up to you to decide if you want to allow that song to be played and allow the student not to have to stand in the center of the circle. So again, case by case basis when you're dealing with that. Okay, so now I want to go into my favorite activity out of them all, which is created by Kalani, again, out of his Jamnasium book. And I have really developed this one and really made a lot of variations and accommodations for it. But it's called Pieces of 8. So it's very dependent on everybody in the room. And they're going to create a unique piece of music in the moment, and it's easily accessible to everyone. So it doesn't matter if you can barely play an instrument. It doesn't matter if you are like the rhythm king or queen and you can just do all these complex things. Everybody can do this at the same time, no matter what level they're at. The skill development is going to be listening, eye gaze, and working memory. So I do it in a couple rounds. So round 1, I'm going to assign everyone a number 1 through 8. In the circle, I assign it in order. So depending on the number of students, I'll group them together, but you're all ones, you're all twos, threes, fours, fives, six, sevens, eights. So that way our numbers just go right in numerical order around the circle. Nobody is missed, no numbers are missed, everything's there. Then I'm going to, again, demonstrate. I'm going to count a steady rhythm of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, and I'll just keep repeating that. When I get to your number, say your number 3, you are going to make one sound on your instrument at the same time that I say 3. So it would sound like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So once I explain it to the group, we then go through it a couple of times. Usually it's fairly successful. They catch on really quick. It's going around in a circle. They're able to see when their number's coming. They're able to anticipate it. They're able to usually fall right on that number. The next thing I'm going to do is assign them new numbers, but this time I'm going to omit some numbers. So maybe you're group 1 and you're group 2. I'm going to skip number 3, you're group 4, skip number 5, you're 6, 7, something like that, and work my way. So still in order, but now I'm missing numbers. And this is going to help introduce rests or silence to the group. So they have to know, if I'm number 6 and there's no 5, I can't just play during that 5. I have to wait for 6. I have to wait for her to say 6, even though there's nothing happening during 5. And so then we'll go around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, and it goes around again in a circle. Now I'm going to do round 3. So round 3, I'm going to assign them a number based on their instrument type. So all, metals will be together, woods, low drums, high drums, depending again on the number of participants or number of students that you have. You may have to do like number 1 and 2 is the metal group. So half of them are 1, half 2, split it up however you want to do it. Sometimes we have more of the membrane drums than we do of any of the other groups. So those might have to be split more as well. Now this is going to cause it, depending on how you set up your room and depending on what the students are playing, this is going to cause the numbers to now not be next to each other. So now you might have a 1 hitting here and a 1 hitting over here on the other side of the circle. So this is now where we're going to start to hear the sounds happen around the room. So that's round 3. And you may have to do that one a couple of times. You may have to really assist with that. Then round 4 and beyond, I will say, okay, in your mind, I want you to pick a number from 1 to 8. Don't tell me what it is. Keep that number in your mind. 1 through 8, pick one number. Then I'm going to start counting. When I get to the second count, I will tell you to start. So I'll give you this sign, which will tell you to start. And when we get to that second time, you're going to play only on your number. And so we go through it that way. This is an example of Kalani doing it. Everybody's already had their numbers. He's counting off, and you will see he does fading right away, but I'll talk about that in a minute.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
And you can even hear where he was pointing and say, listen to the melody. You heard a couple people kind of played not quite on their number, and you will get students who will be like, I forgot which number I was on, and they might miss their number on a round. And I miss my number on a round sometimes too, because I'm counting and I'm trying to pay attention to what everybody's doing. And so sometimes I'll forget, oh, I was 4 and 4 just went by and I didn't play. So you just kind of keep going and everybody will get back on. So some accommodations, you might need to point to a student when it's their number, especially in the beginning when you're just starting this activity out. And if you have someone who is having difficulty playing on their number or is hard of hearing, you may be able to kind of walk near them and tap them on the shoulder if you need to. As you do this and it gets more and more complicated, you can allow students to stay on their original number. So if they're having trouble with that memory and that recall, you can say, okay, what number can you remember? So I'm really at 4. 4 is all I know. Okay, then you're going to stay on 4. And when they're ready, again, I bring this activity back through lots and lots of sessions because it's such a fun one and it has so much room for growth that over time they may be able to then change their number. So it's okay if they want to keep that same number. If you have a student who's counting out loud, maybe they don't even realize they're doing it, but they're counting out loud with you, it's okay to let them do that. You could even stop counting. If they're keeping a steady enough count, try feeding your counting and seeing if that student can still keep going. Then they become the leader and now you've pulled back and the circle is being led by the students, which can be amazing. And then you can go around and help other people. Eventually you do want to phase your counting. And that's going to bring a whole nother level of what the students will have to listen and focus on. So talkback number 1. So this is after I've done about like the first 2 or 3 rounds, especially after I've done where I switch them to their instrument sounds. So they're across the room from each other. What was challenging about the activity? Was there something that you did that made it easier? So maybe if you knew someone across the circle had the same sounding instrument as you kept your eye on them. Were you listening for them? Then raise your hand if you know someone that was playing the same number as you. So this would be after they get to pick their own numbers. Can they identify who it was? Raise your hand if you focused only on your number. Often that's what's going to happen. You're going to get a lot of people. I was just trying to remember my number. I was trying so hard just to make sure I came in on time. So then we ask, how could it be beneficial to be aware of who was playing what number in relation to your own? So somebody who came before you, someone who came after you, someone who was playing at the same time as you, right? So we pose that question to them. Oh, think about that. Okay, let's try it again. Now they're going to start listening to what's happening around them. Now we're going to start getting that joint attention happening. We're not just focused here on me. So we play it again. Now I have another talk back. What was different this time? How did listening to somebody else help you? You still will find that some students will be like, nope, just focused on me. That's where I was. Again, over time, they're going to get more and more comfortable with this activity. And you may find that they're going to be able to focus on others rather than just right here. That's why we want to do this. So did they find themselves listening more? Did they hear a specific pattern? So sometimes you can get some amazing rhythms and melodies happening. Was that easier? Like I've had sometimes when we get to playing multiple numbers where for some reason those low drums will start to create, 2s and 4s and 1s and 3s or whatever. Now we've got this solid groove happening underneath that's helping everybody to lock in and keep their time. And then you've got these melodies happening over top. So sometimes that comes out. And then if you faded your counting, what was the challenge when there wasn't any counting? How were they able to keep track of the numbers? The first time you do it, it might fall apart. And so you might have to have a talk back right away after it fell apart and then put it back together and keep going. Second activity I'm going to share with you today is orbit, which is the object is to pass a rhythm all the way around the circle. This is very similar to telephone if you've ever played that when you were a child. This is going to use listening, eye contact, and awareness of others. So the process is you start with a nice steady, maybe 4 beats, 4 quarter notes, evenly spaced. Going to start by passing it to the person to my left, and then that person's going to take it and play it, passing it to the person to their left. So I'm just going to go. And so forth, and it's going to work its way around the circle. The idea behind it is you want to look at the person you're sending the rhythm to. So when you're playing it, your body language is saying, I am sharing this rhythm with you. I am passing this rhythm to you. And when you're receiving it, you want to make sure you're looking at that person, your turn to that person. Your body language is say, I'm paying attention to you. I am receiving this from you. That's where we want to get with this. That's where the goal is. The other thing is we want, just like with telephone, the idea is if I start with this pattern, will I get that back at the end of the circle? Is it going to come to me the exact same way? So that's where we're trying to get it. So things that will happen is you may find somebody's not paying attention as you're trying to pass the rhythm to them. They're looking off somewhere else, right? What do? Does the rhythm just happen? Just drop? Or sometimes what I've had is the person on the other side will be like, well, that person's not paying attention, so I'm just going to continue with it and we'll keep it going around the circle. Or what happens if I play, but the rhythm that comes back to me, and I know that rhythm's wrong, do I play what was given to me, or do I turn around and play the right rhythm? And the answer is you should take whatever rhythm is given to you. So if this person gives me a different rhythm than I know the leader started with, I have to take the rhythm that's being given to me. That's the point. We want to see where it changes and why did it change. Those are the things that we're after. Sorry, I'm going through this just a little fast because I want to get on, make sure I get everything in that I had to say today. So then adding a level of challenge, depending upon the number of students that you have in your circle, would be, okay, we're doing good. The eye contact is happening. We're passing this rhythm around. Everybody's able to play the same rhythm. Fantastic. I can watch it. I'm ready for it. We're golden. Okay, so now I'm going to start my rhythm. And as that rhythm goes around the circle, when it gets to a certain point, I'm going to start a second rhythm. So now we've got two rhythms going around the circle. Depending on the number of participants, the larger the group, the more rounds you can send at the same time. If you've got the 7 students, 2 will be your max. And even then it could be slightly challenging. So now what's going to happen is if I'm that person that's like, I got this, I'm watching that rhythm go around the circle. Got it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Send it on. It's going. Oops. Now there's a second one coming at me and I had no clue because I'm watching that first one go around the circle. So now what needs to happen is we have to have a talk back and we have to say, I need to look at the person I'm receiving my rhythm from and look at the person I'm sending it to. As soon as I send my rhythm, I have to turn back and look at the person I'm receiving it from. So my attention has to be here, not out there. So an example of what that looks like, Kalani sends 4 rhythms around the room. So you can see how challenging that gets as the more gets sent. So the aim is focus on the steady pulse and not the speed. And we don't want this one to go extremely fast because then that's going to be really challenging for them when there's more rhythms happening. Make sure also that those rhythms are connecting in with each other and easily played together. So avoid anything too challenging. Try to limit the verbal commands. Notice there wasn't any verbal commands happening. So once the pattern begins, if you're trying to talk, it's going to be too much. So if you need to assist a student, make sure that you are doing it with tapping or touching or any way that's nonverbal, because you're just going to confuse that sound of that rhythm that's moving around the room. If you have someone who is visually impaired, again, you can try tapping them on the shoulder when it's their turn. They're able to hear it, so they can hear when what the pattern is. So they're not going to have any trouble with that, but they might just have trouble knowing if it's right next to them and if it is their turn to play. So the person next to them that plays it could also gently tap them on the shoulder, or a para or yourself could be tapping them on the shoulder if you need to. If you have someone who has auditory processing disorder or hearing impairment, I encourage them to look at the hands of the person that is giving them the rhythm. So that way they're not focused on what the sound is, they're focused on what the movement is, and then hopefully they can also mimic that movement. And so depending on the instruments, if somebody again is nonverbal or not nonverbal, if someone is unable to move their arms or unable to move from the neck down, you can always have them verbalize the rhythms as well. You know, some people might have trouble even if they can only shake something, creating the exact rhythm. So again, you're going to have to use the guide of the students that are in the room to let you know how simple or how complicated rhythms could be. Maybe you're just doing half notes, and then maybe you try 2 in a row. Keep it so that everybody in the room has the capability of playing the rhythms, because we want, again, it's all about inclusion. You want everyone to be able to be part of this. So again, with the talkback, if a rhythm was dropped, why did that happen? Most often it's because you weren't looking, you weren't paying attention. So you may have to play this, do a talkback, play again, because you want them to be aware of that eye contact. Was one of the rhythms changed? That's always a great question. As I mentioned, if so, why? What did you do? Did you change it yourself because you knew it was wrong? Did you, take it as was? And then again, you want to make sure that they know you need to take it as it was, and you can do another round. What happened when we had a person who you were sending the rhythm to that wasn't looking at you? So again, what did you do? Did you try to get that person's attention? Did the other person on the other side of them just take your rhythm and we just skipped that person? What happened? Okay, let's try it again. And how do you make sure you don't drop the rhythm? Again, the eye contact. You want to make sure you're not watching it go around the room, but that your attention is here and here. And then you can also say, well, how's that like listening in the classroom? If there's a lot of things going on, where should your focus be? Or maybe you're having a conversation at lunch in the lunchroom and there's a lot of activities that are happening around you. So again, trying to connect that to what's happening in every day. Echo is something that we also do all the time. So you guys do this, I'm sure, in classes every day. So you're going to play something, they're going to repeat it back. This is going to work on listening, teamwork, improvisation, awareness of self and others, and working memory. So I'm going to show you a quick thing. Again, you're going to play something, they're going to repeat it. You can start off simple and then get more challenging. You can have students do some improvisation and have them create the rhythms and then become the leader, and you sit with the rest of the group and you echo. Quick video of Kalani doing this where he's got already a groove established, which this again would be a higher level of, where you want to make sure that your students are able to have something else happening while they're focusing on you. So, but this is just an example of where they've got a groove and now he's starting the echo. So not only accommodations and modifications was he helping them by pointing to them. So I'm playing, now you're playing. He was also kind of signaling what the rhythm was, bump, 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 bump. So he was assisting them in that aspect as well, which you can do. You can come up with sayings to vocalize the rhythms. I can play my drum. That might help first. Do that a couple times, fade that out, and then see what you can do with that. As I mentioned, you might not get past the first stage. You might end up where you have to create and they have to respond. Also, one thing you can do if you're looking for more of a challenge is as the students are responding to repeating back what you just echoed, you can start a next rhythm. So now they're still playing and they have to listen to you at the same time. And that can add a level of difficulty if you're looking for something more challenging. So then again, talk back. What were you focusing on? How did you know when to listen and when to play? How does this activity relate to our daily conversations? Have to, if you're asking a question, wait for somebody to respond back before you start coming in with the next thing. Why was it difficult when I started to play a second rhythm while you were still repeating the first? And how is that similar to having a conversation with someone? Sculpting is a great thing to do, not only because it highlights certain players, but it helps to bring out sounds that we might not otherwise have heard. So sculpting is going to target a specific group of players or kind of instruments, depending on what you're wanting to point out, that might get lost in the overall sound of what's happening. So the way that this works, first it's going to work on awareness of others and listening. What's going to happen is I'm going to get the attention of a set number of players. And once I've got their attention, and of course I would explain this before we were even playing. Once I have their attention, I'm going to make a motion. I'm going to point my fingers at each other and do circling motion. And this is going to tell them to continue to play. So again, I'm looking at you guys here. I want you to continue to play. You're going to continue playing while I stop the rest of the group. So this lets you know what I'm asking you to do. Continue playing. Then I'm going to go over to the other side, or the other people that I want to stop. I'm going to get their attention, and I'm going to give them 4, 3, 2, 1, stop. And I will quickly turn back to the people I want to keep playing, and I'm going to give them this sign again so that they know. Eventually you can fade that out where you don't have to quickly turn back and say keep going. And so this is going to be great. You're going to hear this in this example with Castagna, this amazing groove that was happening underneath that was slightly hidden because everybody was playing at the same time. If you picked up on it, that was then the groove that he had going underneath when he started the echo happening in the previous video. So you could hear this really cool groove was happening underneath, and he just brought it out by sectioning that off. And he does his dynamics this way. So when he did the 4, 3, 2, 1, he was also bringing them in, kind of like getting ready to get smaller for that cutoff. Okay, so there's a lot more activities, and if we had more time, I could go through a lot of them with you. And if we were in person, we could play all of these instead of using the videos. But jamming to music, as I mentioned, is a big one that I like to do, and I do like to end my sessions with that as well. It kind of just gets everybody to get back into their own space for a minute, to calm down. Drumming does kind of get the heart rate going and does get the students talking more. So whoever has the students after you might not be so appreciative that you just did a drum circle, or they could be, because now they might actually be more engaged and participating more and talking more in class. Could go either way. But I do like to just kind of end the circle with something to bring them down a little bit. I do have activities where I get them up and moving around the room. So they have to find somebody who's playing a rhythm that they're playing, or playing an instrument that they're playing. Or I've got one where you have to communicate non-verbally to find somebody to jam with, and I'll move through different songs. Another one, transition decision. As we know, transitions are very hard, and this can be where they have to non-verbally say to somebody, I would like to have your instrument, I would like to switch instruments with you, and having to do that non-verbal. And what's that like when you have to approach somebody and non-verbally let them know, with your body language, that you would like that instrument? And then how do you, what if you don't want to give up your instrument, and how is that going to happen? And again, you're going to have to play, by ear with the group that you have. Call and response is so much fun to do, especially when the students can come up with the response themselves. And so you can do a couple of those. Obviously, I do ones where I say, I'm going to say this and you're going to say that, and we go back and forth that way. And then I like to do it where if I can section off the room into 4 sections, then you can have call and response happening across the areas, and everybody can have different calls and different responses that they're doing. So you can, again, start very, very easy with it. The whole group is responding to your call. You're giving them what the response is, to now you're sectioning them off and doing different call and responses, to now they're going to improvise and make up their own. soloing is great. So eventually we want them to get to where you have the full drum circle just happening by itself. Everybody's grooving, all these great rhythms are happening. You're feeling the layering that's there. And then allow somebody the chance to solo. So bringing the group down so that solo then can come out. How is that person going to communicate that they would like to solo? As we know, you're going to end up with that one person who's going to want to constantly solo and never give it up for somebody else. So how do you communicate with that? How does that person, how do you let them know to be aware of what's happening around them, that somebody else wants to take the chance to solo? And how does the person who wants to solo let that person know? So again, now we're lots of nonverbal communication happening, and how are we going to make that happen? Then there's vocalization pieces. So taking pieces and, you know, everybody has a specific thing that they're going to say, and then you're going to bring that together and you're going to then play it on your instruments. So how is that, like making sure the balance is there and making sure you're not mumbling? I had one group of students who from Chapel Haven, they would come down on the city bus. As soon as we did this vocalization and we were doing the talkback, they're like, oh, it was like the bus driver. He was calling out the stops and he was mumbling into the microphone and it was really loud and we couldn't hear what he was saying. And they made that connection on their own, which was fantastic. Boom whackers. Always love bringing boom whackers into it. One, some of my older students did not have the chance to do boom whackers when they were younger because they weren't out there and didn't exist. And so at first, when you bring them out, they're kind of skeptical, and then everybody enjoys them and has fun. So I especially love with the older groups doing the boom whackers because it's new for them and exciting because they've never done it before. And you know, first they're like, this is for the little kids, and then they're like, wow, this is so much fun. Every activity we've just done can be done with boom whackers. I mean, think about when you're doing pieces of 8, the amazing melodies that you're going to have created with those boom whackers. I also will assign them chords. We'll do the standard 4-chord progression for the pop music, and we'll go through that, and then we talk about like what pop songs fit over top of it. And then I'll even bring out the marimbas and vibraphones and xylophones and let them improvise, and whew, you'd be amazed at some of the wonderful music that comes out of them when they improvise on those instruments. But the main thing, don't force any of the activities. If something's not working, just move on to the next one. Read the class, make sure that you're not transitioning through something just because you have to get on to the next thing, just because it was planned. You know, if you may have only one student who has trouble with transitioning, or you may have a whole class that has trouble with transitioning. So you really want to be mindful of that. And if there's going to be an activity that's really going to cause a lot of anxiety, then just stop and move on to the next one. But these are just some ideas. As I mentioned, most of these were taken from Kalani and Arthur Hall. But also rotate instruments. I forgot to mention that one. I always make sure that I say, if I change an activity or even in the middle of an activity, all right, everybody get up and pick a different instrument. That way it gets, you know, if you've got a student who came in late or something and didn't get the drum they wanted, this now might give them the opportunity to get one that they do want, or if somebody wants to try something else. I have had it where students will not switch instruments whatsoever. And I've just tried to gently kind of help them each week. And by the end, I had one student who finally, the very last week, switched instruments, and that was a high moment for me. I said, "All right, we have succeeded. She has reached her goal for this session." So just remember not to force anything. But as Dr. Bernard said, you'll get the slides that you can look through, and I also have bibliography that's attached in here as well. The link to that, which has the Arthur Hall and the Kalani books with a lot of these activities taken right in them. And you can always contact me if you need any advice on how to adapt any of these.
Thank you, Gretchen. Let's make sure that if people have questions, that we have a moment for some folks to put those in the chat or in the Q&A. In case there are questions for Gretchen. This presentation was fabulous. For me, it's so fun because I haven't been in regular contact with your work. So I love seeing how your work has developed in the time since we last talked.
I believe there is a question already in the chat. Do you have any videos of actual students working through this and what this looks like in a real life setting?
Unfortunately, I don't, because most of the students that I've worked with do not want themselves videoed. And that was kind of a general situation that I've run into. I think I have like one picture that was allowed to be taken that was given to me, but it's basically of me standing there like facilitating in the center. So yeah, unfortunately I don't, which is why I had to use videos from other sources.
Another question, do you think drum circles would work with younger students, and how young would you go?
That's a great question. And I would definitely, if I worked, I think it will work with younger students. You definitely have to adapt the programs. And I would call up Nadia and I'd be like, Nadia, help me, because she's so amazing with the younger students as well, that I have no problem asking for help when it comes to it. But I do think that it is possible. Yeah.
Absolutely. Lots of gratitude for how great the presentations were on both of your accounts. I'm going to, first of all, thank you both. Huge applause, amazing presentations, lots and lots of practical things that I think folks will really benefit from. I'll also mention that in response to someone in the chat, I posted not only West Music's website, but a link to another site that has great resources about adapted instruments, which I think are really helpful. So do check that out if that's helpful to you. And before I transition, it looks like I am picking up a class of 32 primary pupils not allowed instruments. Do you think this would work seated at tables? We get nods from both of our presenters that seated at tables, yes, it can work. So there we go for that. Before we close out the morning session, and remember that at 1 o'clock we have Tomas Marquez working with us on technology and also on working with students with high support needs. I want to just share, I've been talking about the projects and the project documents. So just, many of you have done this already, but just so there is no lack of clarity in the world, we're going to hit, I'm going to share my screen and show you the Google sheet that we are using. It's a Google Doc that I've been sending out the link after every session, that people are writing their project ideas. So you put your name on the left and your project idea on the right, and I respond to you in purple. And you'll see we have many, many pages of this document. I haven't gotten to the last couple of folks, but I've responded to everyone. I respond every couple of days. So check back in the document to read my purple response. You can see the ones I haven't responded to at the bottom. And then I've added some more blocks for us to use. So if you haven't written about what you want your project to be or your ideas about it, this is a place to do that, so I can help you make sure you're not biting off too much, and so that we're thinking in a way that makes sense given the parameters of what we're working on. The ideas have been terrific. There have been things like, I would like to look at how kids playing in an orchestra and working together can help students focus. Great, that's a fabulous idea. I would like to look at ways to make my virtual group violin classes more effective and accessible, right? I would like to explore and study new technology to assist musicians with visual impairment. So you see, there's lots of different ideas here based on people's specific situations. And that's the really important thing. The most important thing is that the project be super relevant to what you're doing now in your current situation, so that this is not, already we're having a great educational experience, but what's going to make it more valuable is when we can take what we've learned and run with it and adapt it and try it out and make it have life and meaning in our own settings. So that's the whole purpose behind all of this. You do not need to update your project idea in the document weekly. If you have written something and I have responded to you, go off and do your thing. If it morphs and changes, we will see the results of that morph and change when we see the projects on May 15th. So that's not necessary. This is a question, I think, for Gretchen. Do you ever use these techniques with middle school and high school students?
Yes, definitely. And again, each group is going to be different. So with, like, for my high school students, they are obviously performing arts students. So the rhythms and the things that we can do are a lot more advanced than what it is with the middle school, especially with the middle school age, with the attitude of their development of afraid to step out and do something that will make them stand out. So completely different types of circles, but yes, I do them with both of those groups and very successfully.
Terrific. Thank you. So we are all set with our program for the morning session. So I'm going to thank again our fabulous presenters, Nadia, Castanya, Morin, and Gretchen, Hary. Thank you both so very much. And I'm going to thank all of you for being here. We are going to sign off. We will see those of you who are coming to our afternoon session. It starts at 1 o'clock. Eastern time. So we will see you then. Laura and I will be showing up nice and early. Thank you all so very much for being here, and we will be back shortly. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.